at the D&D table. I'm Soren.
And I'm Caitie. Now you can see us. We're not in a closet.
Not anymore.
Okay. And this week in the Rose Garden, we're talking about the importance of other players' voices at the table. So you might recall that last time was solo adventure focus. And this week we're talking about everybody else because it takes two to tango.
Sure does.
So we, again, as always, have like little structure to our conversation today. And we're going to both get very used to and comfortable with doing all of this in front of a camera.
Yeah, it's not going to be weird at all. It's going to be like so smooth and seamless that like no one's going to notice like anyone being awkward about anything because we're not.
Right.
We are
right.
literally professionals.
So good.
Tink.
And sink it. So, we're going to start off talking about the importance of other players' voices kind of above table. And then we'll get into some role-playing stuff later. But above table, as you might recall, means like above the game. So this is not role-playing. This is the opposite.
This is like the logistics side
right.
like how are we going to do what we're going to do while we play the game.
Right. So to start off with, like we've said before, it takes two to tango. It's not just a solo game, although I suppose it could be if you really wanted it to. But usually it's not. And so, I mean, other people's voices are important in general.
Yeah.
But specifically, mechanical conversations. Not everybody is like well versed in the rules,
the mainframe of D&D, if you will, or TTRPGs in general.
Right. Yeah. So it is helpful to have a few players at the table who are familiar and do feel confident in those things to be able to kind of help guide other players along as we go through the game. And I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because you've said before that like the mechanical side of things, like combat rules, all of that kind of stuff is like a stressy, messy point for you. How do you prefer to receive mechanical assistance?
Okay, I was wondering where this was headed, but that is a great way to phrase it. I think what comes to mind initially is like a couple things, which is how I might have received any kind of mechanical assistance, like at the beginning when I felt really, really nervous and really insecure about my ability and about learning about it. But now I think it would be helpful to see more people be honest about when they're like, I don't know what that does, or like that actually doesn't make sense. Like, could you break that down for me? Because it's not that like I can't ask myself, because I'll lead to that. But having an example and like having a culture of, or like an environment of like, it's okay to ask questions. Like, it's okay to like be unsure. Like you forgot to read your, your specific details for such and such a thing. That's totally fine. I'm getting very distracted by my cat. But yeah, if there were just more of a culture around like, go ahead, ask questions, because I feel like when I started out with such a great group of people that were very open to that. And then there are moments in session where I, like with our campaigns, where I'm like, ooh, I'm going to look really stupid. Like if I ask that question, it's like a consistent, like need to get over it. So as far as like receiving assistance, if people could read my brain, but that's not a thing. So more than that, being able to show me, like, if I ask somebody for help, like TJ, like being able to show me like where either in the player's handbook or like where I might find the answer that I'm looking for, or like a resource that I can come back to. So rather than just giving me the answer, like showing me like, hey, you can also like find that like here-ish when it comes to like rogues or when it comes to elves, which I think is much more of like an above table type of communication.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's say that we're in combat and we're going around the table and we'll pretend like it's your turn. And I am across the room and I can see you like struggling with something. And let's pretend like I know what you're trying to do.
Sure.
Is it detrimental for me to say, ooh, Soren, I think you're looking for this. And here's how it works? Does that feel like it's inhibiting your ability to find the answer yourself?
No. I don't, for me personally.
Sure, yeah, right.
I don't think so. I think I've seen examples of people not appreciating that, but for me, I think it would be okay. I think like a step above that to like make that even better, I would maybe offer something like the phrase like, do you need an assist? Or like, would you like some help? Or like something like that. That's a little softer around the edges, still gives me a little autonomy to like turn it down, but also it's like it's kind of like a teammate thing then, instead of being like, hey, if this is what you're looking for, like blah, 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 being like, hey, would you like an assist? Actually, that might be how I would prefer to hear it. Yeah. Because TJ's done he's had some similar phrases, just different combinations of words that all kind of mean that same thing, and that is way easier for me to be like, yeah, actually I'm trying to look for this.
The reason I ask all of these questions is because if you've not been in a D&D combat situation, I mean, in theory, it should be relatively quick. It should be a fast-paced environment. And depending on how many people are at your table, it can be a while till it gets to you.
So you have a little bit of like downtime.
Right. And we've all been in those moments where it took a while to get to us and we were not paying attention, and then suddenly it's our turn and we don't have our turn figured out. We don't have a plan for what we're trying to do, and you're like, hang on 1 second, and you're like trying to, like go through all of your spells or your action options. And Sam doesn't do this as much, but I know I've seen Matt Mercer do this before, of saying things like, come on, like, what do you do? Come on. Like trying to like keep that fast-paced environment going, because each round in a combat is 6 seconds. So you don't actually, like, in game, you wouldn't have the time to sit there and read through rules and so I mean, every table is different, and if you have newer people at your table, it makes sense to give them the space to like figure out what's going on.
But with seasoned players, it almost could better serve the game and like better serve the flow of the game and combat, because combat can already be like very grueling. To have a little bit of like a fire under your ass.
Right. Well, and also the other reason I ask this is because I think this is the one part of the game that you can be right or wrong, in that like there is not a subjective reading of the rule. Like it's either the rule or it's not. And so I think in comparison to our conversations about like role play, combat is the one place where like it's not just about being vulnerable in front of your friends, like role playing, but it's like I'm showing my cards as to how well I understand the mechanics of the game. And that's where a lot of that like insecurity, I think, can pop up.
Absolutely.
And so I was, when preparing for this, I was like, I know this is something that Soren doesn't feel like fully secure in and like being able to memorize rules and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, as somebody who is at her table, how would she prefer to hear my voice in that moment?
Yeah. That made me think of something else I could compare it to. Something I feel much more like comfortable about mechanically are the video games that I play daily. And I think that is because I'm in them constantly, and I can absolutely like lean into doing some like solo adventures and stuff. It's for D&D purposes to like get that same experience, but it's like it's not the same as being able to play against a bunch of computer like monsters or like different enemies. And then when I'm in those games daily, like the games I'm specifically talking about, you have to like build characters, make them like work for the role that they have. So it's very like, it's RPG. It is an RPG. But I feel like if I could apply everything I know about Genshin Impact is the game that I'm referencing. If I could apply everything I know about Genshin to D&D or like translate it, I think I would feel so much more comfy.
Can I recommend Baldur's Gate to you?
I am definitely not against Baldur's Gate. I'm just a big baby when it comes to like violence and like blood. And so some of like the gory stuff like freaks me out. And that is what like turns me off to some games.
I have not played a lot of it, but I have not experienced a level of gore that I would have considered to be like, ooh, this is a lot.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, TJ plays it, and like, I mean, he super enjoys it, so I would definitely be like interested in trying it.
I will say, I was talking about this with Emily last week. She finished it.
Whoa.
And I asked her, I was like, do you think this has deepened your understanding of D&D combat? And she goes, 1,000,000%.
Cool.
So, I mean, if we're talking about being in something daily and like that is, I think, the way that you could access the combat side of D&D more regularly.
Because they handle the role-playing side for you.
I mean, and you still have
decisions,
but
right? But they handle the line delivery and, and the emotion.
And I think we've talked about this before, but in the short time that I did play it there for a second, you are in control of an entire party.
Yeah.
So like, it's not just what does the rogue do on their turn. It's like, okay, well, I've got a rogue, a warlock, a wizard, and a cleric. How do I use all of that to make sense? And like the fun part, I guess, is that there's no peer pressure. Nobody is sitting around the computer watching you make these decisions.
Yeah, you can kind of fuck up.
Right, like it's a video game, so if it doesn't work and you fail, you reload and try again. So like that could be an interesting way to mess with that.
Because I think what it is about Genshin is the repetition and is the like there are D&D has a similar I'll say like accessorizability. Whoa, that's not a word. Ability to accessorize?
Okay.
Ability to with like other resources and tools and like all that good stuff. Well, Genshin has a bunch of similar stuff where like there's an app that's made by the game developer that's dedicated to like guides for like how to build characters, how to give them like the best weapon and how to like build it quickly or in a certain way. And so I think also leaning into some of those things that like D&D Beyond provides, like while playing Baldur's Gate or whatever guides live out there, I think that would also be really handy.
Well, and I'm sure this is true of Genshin, but like in the game, there are like definitions, like when you're clicking on something you can read more about it, like all of that kind of stuff.
Like when you run into puzzles and stuff that you've never run into, there's like a little question mark that pops up and it like gives you a quick like, this is how this puzzle works. Have fun.
I even think like in the middle of combat, like you could, I don't remember what the mechanic is, but like right click on a spell or something like that and it'll give you like the pop-up definition of like what that does.
That is something I like. I know that I talk a big game about loving like paper. But what I love about digital character sheets is being able to click on literally anything and it pulls up like a blurb for you.
I mean, this isn't a combat focused episode, but that is why I use my digital. I don't have all this shit memorized. I don't have any of this memorized.
See, what I struggle with though sometimes, and this could be the like ADHD talking, it could be something else, but like when I'm in the middle of combat and I'm trying to make decisions quickly, even having the resource right in front of my eyeballs can be a struggle for me to comprehend quickly sometimes. And like my working memory like will go offline like briefly, which is a thing for people who deal with like ADHD. And so then I have this little bit of like a mind fog or like a mind like blank where like I am like, I can't think of anything I'm supposed to think of right now. I can't access any of my thoughts. And then I can even like read the blurb and then I'm like, but what does that mean? And then I get just kind of like stuck there. So I definitely think that going the route of like testing out Baldur's Gate. Yeah. After I somehow make it out of the character creation part of the tutorial, I think that would be a very good way to like ingrain a lot of the mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just like the beginning part, because like I said, I've only played a little bit, and the beginning part to me was not overly gory. So maybe there's stuff later that is gory that I just haven't run into yet. But that beginning part, I mean, we had a few rounds of combat like that you run into, so it might be worth just giving it a shot.
Some stuff that like TJ like mentioned, or like I saw some scenes that like spooked me, but he did emphasize the fact that like you can make choices that like avoid some of that, and you can like sidestep some of that, but like it's not always avoidable. But there's a lot of like a bunch of different like plot like trails, and you can combine and like mix and match, and it can all just turn into a completely different story.
Right. Okay, that's enough about that.
That's shush.
Another thing, I'm gonna let you talk about this a little bit because I think this was part of what you were talking about when we were prepping for it. Boundaries and safety tools.
Sure, yeah.
And importance to other players' voices.
Yeah. So I think that we have, in a few episodes, we've talked about it in very, very small quantities. But some of what I think is super important about other players' voices is like collectively working with the team to understand like what is okay, like for us to like territory for us to go into, what is not okay territory for us to go into, and then something that I have yet to implement or like ask Sam about or ask TJ about is like, is there a phrase or is there like a trigger that like lets everyone in the party know like this is maybe like not good for me, or like this is a little too much for me. And I think that just varies. Like, I'm not saying that Sam is never allowed to kill my character's best friend ever again, because shit happens. But I think I could have used, specifically referencing like Valen's death, I think Soren the player, could have used yes, this thing happened, but I need to like step out. And I did. Like I eventually like I took myself out of the scenario, but looking back at it, I wish I had a phrase to be like, this was a little too much for me. I'm going to step out. But you all figured that out. But it's those kinds of things where if you don't feel good in a situation, you're allowed to remove yourself. Something that I appreciate about Sam and about TJ is that they know us on like intimate levels. So like they are literally very good friends and or like our spouses. So they know us super well. They understand like what might be too much or like pushing the line. But for those scenarios where we're playing with people we're not familiar with, like as we, grow the community and play with more and more people, understanding like, what do I have in my back pocket just in case?
Yeah, I think something that's worth noting about our table is that we're all very close friends, similarly to like Critical Role, in that I don't know that I feel it necessary for us to have safety tools at our table.
Sure.
From the perspective of how close we all are already.
Yeah.
Like Sam has said before, because I asked him, I think once, what he thought about things like lines and veils, which I'll talk about here in a second. But he was like, I don't feel like that's necessary because I know you guys well enough to know what is going to be chill to bring up and what's not going to be chill to bring up. Yeah. We're not like a very... we're not a very romantic table. So like our players or our characters don't often try to start like romantic relationships with each other. Not that they're impossible. Sam did it in Grant's game.
He does like little like lead-ins. Like he definitely like gives our players the opportunity. Because he definitely gave like my character the opportunity. Yep. And I think just with even when he describes characters, it's like, ooh, okay, now I can like make a decision about if I want to go for that.
So it's not that that's off limits, but in that vein, he has more than once been like, I know that like we're never going to do a sex scene. That's not something our table's ever going to be interested in doing.
They feel like doing.
And just like in general, he knows like what sort of like villains and plot points are going to be good hooks, and then what's the like barrier to that, where should that stop, kind of a thing. Lines and veils, though, are legitimate safety tools that are used more widely across tabletop RPGs. A line is, I'm getting this from dicebreaker.com also. Put simply, a line is something which will never come up as a part of a campaign or a session, while a veil ensures that whilst an action or event might take place, this will happen off screen, mentioned in passing, but not dwelled on in any detail, and not a significant part of any plot or encounter. They were first developed by Ron Edwards in Sex and Sorcery, a supplement to his RPG Sorcerer, in which he discusses a number of scenarios involving sex, how they might be handled in different ways, and how they might affect the players around the table. So, for instance, a line we might have at our table is animal abuse.
Yeah.
That's something we never ever want to see at our table. It's not interesting to us. That's not something we want to touch or be around or anything like that. Veil might be something like sexy times.
Like we might be like maybe an animal does pass, but like it doesn't happen like in session.
Right. Okay, fair. More along the lines with what I had originally said.
That's all good. Keep going.
Like a veil is like, or even like Prim and Valen's death.
Yeah. That was
veiled.
Yes.
Nobody saw what happened.
Yes.
It was not described in detail.
Yep.
But it did occur.
Yeah.
And
which is probably good.
Yeah.
Like at least for my character's concern. Like
I will say I'm interested in...
I'm pissed about it.
I'm interested in the death pieces because, I mean, had that been a combat scenario and TJ had just rolled bad on his death saving throws, you know, that is just like, to me personally, I think that is a fundamental piece of the game, that there is that level of stake. So I'm curious, would that have been different for you, Soren, the player?
Like to watch that happen? I think it would have... I think it might have onset faster.
Sure.
Like when I got the news, I was kind of able to like pseudo sit in it for a sec. But if it onset happened, I definitely think it would have froze. I think it would have, like, the emotion would have onset faster. And then I probably would have either, like, gone straight to TJ or been, like, watching him to kind of cue off of him. Because if he was physically there, it's a lot easier for me to be like, manage your own emotions until you know, like, how, like, TJ feels, because you're literally looking at him right now. But when he wasn't in the room, like, he was in the room, but it wasn't during combat. Does that make sense?
It wasn't happening, like, real time.
Like, he had just had a sec to be like, yeah, okay.
Right.
So, like, I didn't get to watch that real time.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it would have gone faster, and I think I might have mitigated a little bit of the, like, emotional outpouring a little bit more. But yeah,
there are RPGs that death is even more permanent. Yeah. Like, there's no such thing as death saving throws. Once you're down to 0 hit points, you're down. That's it. Yeah. And that's not to say, you know, just because I feel like I like that part of the game, the fact that there are stakes, the fact that, like, a character's story could close because of, you know, a bad roll or something like that. Doesn't mean that has to be true for everybody. So, like, if you're at a table where death is, like, too much of a hardcore topic and you don't want to deal with that, that could be a line. I think you'll have to have a table that feels similarly, because, like, I think if we had started a session 0, and I'm not saying you would have done this, but like, you or somebody would have said, I don't want there to be death, like, there might have been that would have been hard for me to be like, yeah, cool, sounds good.
No one dies.
Because like, that just takes so much of the, like,
stake out of it, like you said. And I completely agree. As much as it hurts in the moments that it is awful, it's still, and, like, Sam texted me this, and I'm gonna, like, regret saying this, but he texted me and said something along the lines of, I know it hurts right now, but, like, think of, like, the beautiful story that we'll have, like, when it's all said and done. And he's right. Like, it does suck, but it's also very real. Yes. It's also very, like, plausible.
Right. So, I mean, that's, like, the parts of actual play that I enjoy the most also, is, like, that moment and watching everybody freak out. And then the, like, aftermath of that, and being like, holy cow, like, the C3 with Lotte and Orem and Fern having to pick which one she was going to revive, and, like, all that kind of stuff. And then the, like, drive after that for Imogen to figure out how to help Lotte. So, like, but, like, that story wouldn't have been that cool without that. And did it suck for Laura and Marisha? Yes, most likely. And it made, like, this really cool story. So anyway, those are lines and veils. And they happen at tables, and some tables will have even, like, legit physical cards, that, like, a player could hit, like, an X or something, put their hand on an X to indicate to the DM, like, ooh, I am no longer chill with this. And like I said, I think that's far more important when you're at a table of people that you don't know as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I've ever run into a situation in my time playing D&D for the last 4 or 5 years with this group of people where I've ever felt like, oh, I need to tell Sam that I hate this. Like, I've never experienced that. Even like, if you separate uncomfy feeling and alarms are going off, I don't like this. I've had uncomfy feelings. I have never felt an alarm go off. Like, I no longer feel safe.
She's never felt like going wee woo
wee woo. Yeah, exactly. So,
because we can be uncomfy and like play the game, right? But if alarms going off, I love whatever this is. we can be uncomfy, but if alarms are going off, then like someone's multiple safety, whether it be mental, whatever, is at stake, and that's not cool.
And then lastly, above table are restorative conversations.
Yeah.
I've had direct experience with this. I think only the one time.
Okay. I think only
the one time.
I think I've also only had like one-ish. Like I would call it maybe two, but it was because two separate people like talked to me. Yeah.
There was the one encounter where Prim got into an argument with Oren. That's so hard because
you just said
Orem from Critical Role. Anyway, yeah. Oren had an argument that was surrounding like morality of decision making and stuff like that. And if you recall, Prim was 300 and who knows how many years old, and is a cleric, right, of the Wild Mother. And just to set this up, like Oren was significantly younger and is not beholden to any deity.
Yeah. Nope.
And we were basically figuring out like if we need to entertain the morality of the deities in that is it worth saving Melora, the Wild Mother, because maybe she's actually not as altruistic as she claims, kind of a thing. And Prim
not having any of that,
was not about to have that. And in her mindset, like to go a little bit under the hood, like in her mindset, it was not even
pop that hood.
It was not even that she didn't think that Melora had an ability to not be altruistic. I think she knows that like she's not stupid. Like, no, the gods have done some bad things.
Dumb. Yeah.
And the deity that she had chosen to follow that bestowed upon her the powers that she has and that she has fought for and maintained a temple for, the dumb things she's done does not outweigh the good she's given.
Yeah.
And we got into an argument about that.
Character on character argument.
And I don't think Grant or Oren was completely opposed to what Prim was saying. His whole thing was like, let's not make a decision before we know all of the angles.
Yes.
And Prim was like, I've already made a decision. There's no talking about it.
Yes.
And afterwards, and I remember talking about it on the podcast, like I very much felt that like real anger, which I have now learned is bleed. It's called bleed.
Like when referencing like D&D and stuff?
I like TTRPGs, like, and I read it. I very briefly read it.
Writing that one down.
I very briefly read it on Twitter X or whatever it's called now. And I think what I was seeing was it being referred to as a negative thing. You don't want bleed because that can be unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, much like anything, it is unhealthy in certain ratios. I don't think, in my experience in having played this now for 4 or 5 years, I don't think for me it is possible to completely not have bleed.
Yeah, did the tweet like talk about how to avoid it? I didn't
read it in depth. It was something they had referenced another article, and the tweet had said something about like, no, don't promote bleed. Like it's unhealthy. Like bleed is not something you necessarily want.
Do you have your phone? Is it on your left? Haha.
I just don't know if I'm going to be able to find it.
Did you favorite it or bookmark
No.
it? All right.
No.
Well, we can look it up later.
But
okay. So the person is like responding to something and saying like, "Don't promote bleed. Not a good thing for your table."
which I also think, like I said, and not having, you know, fully read it in depth, like I don't know that it is bad innately. Like I think it might be bad to certain,
if it's excessive,
right? Like
it might be detrimental.
You shouldn't, if I was feeling Prim's anger and I just like kind of let that sit in me and like feed off of it, that seems unhealthy.
Yes.
But in role playing, I mean, I heard Laura Bailey talk about this in like voice acting similarity, like just like acting in general, of just like, if you're doing a scene in which the character feels sad, you are going to feel sadness in your own body.
And that is a very like push-pull like dichotomy for someone to be in.
Right.
And that's like part of what we've talked about. I'm gonna guess our entire episode talking about in and out of character, like information and or like acting and role playing is maybe a very blissfully ignorant like understanding of bleed. Right.
So, I mean, in that moment, I did feel anger. Yeah. I felt anger in my own body.
Yep.
And that anger sounded like, who does this guy think he is?
Yeah.
And I have lived so long and fought in the biggest war in our world, and how am I not earning more respect than I'm currently being shown? And I'm pretty sure we ended the session relatively soon after that.
Within, a few minutes after
like that. I remember being a little quiet after that.
Yeah.
And like did some like internal processing of whatever the hell was going on inside my body at that moment.
That emotion has got to get out.
Right.
Somehow.
Right.
Like, how does that vacate
your
body?
Right.
And actually, I want you to continue, but that made me just think of like how we come out of a session, period, and how like that could potentially assist.
Right.
Go on.
But it wasn't until I think after everyone had gone home, I believe Grant had texted and was just like, "Are we still good? Is everything okay?"
Because you both felt it.
And so that's kind of what I mean by those like restorative, like repairing conversations. It is important in D&D because there is going to be some bleed. I actually feel like that is a thing that is necessary and will occur.
Yes.
To be able to have those restorative conversations. And even if they're not wholly pointed, like even if you're not going to text your friend and be like, "Are we still good?" We almost always have about an hour to an hour and a half of like hanging out and playing Jackbox after D&D.
As a reminder.
And it is a little bit of aftercare.
It's all good.
Right.
Yeah. It gives our brains a break, and it also like resets the energy in the room.
Exactly.
It's most helpful after those kinds of scenarios.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a thought with that and then I lost it.
Would you mind on your iPad just like looking up like whatever specific definition we could find of like D&D like referring to bleed?
So this,
what is bleed?
Is from medium.com, which I've not done any research about that.
Not reputable they are, but we're gonna take a gander.
What is bleed? This just says, preface this by saying that this guide was written for our little Discord RPG server, Seattle by Night. Another mod commented it would be a nice thing to share. So here we go. If you're new to role-playing, the term bleed might be confusing or strange, but what it means is pretty straightforward and something we have to be very aware of while role-playing, the boundaries between self and character. Briefly, bleed is what happens when you, the player, feel so connected, so emotionally invested in your character that the events and the emotions they go through start to bleed deeply into your psyche and your personal life. In extreme cases, bleed might even damage your mental health.
Oh no.
The main point of role-playing games is that we address it as just that, a role. That means we take on the guise of the character and interpret their actions, their emotions, and their thoughts. It's a fugue state, but if not properly identified and managed as such, it can become a toxic outlet for personal problems. Vampire the Masquerade deals with monsters, cruel creatures of violence and dominance. Injustice, murder, and other such things can and will happen in our game, and we feel it's essential to speak on this subject here. We could exemplify it with the blood bonds, a cruel mechanic in which another can be enslaved and robbed of their own will. It's psychological horror. It's personal horror, because things like manipulation and abuse are inherent to vampiric society in the game.
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna, this is getting kind of specific.
Yeah, it's okay.
Bleed tends to happen a lot less if you are on a healthy mental space. So it can and will be aggravated by depression, anxiety, or any other illness, as well as extreme burnout.
Sure. Oh, wait. Okay. That. Okay, I think my entire processing of, like, the Valen thing, that was all bleed.
I think that's probably true.
It was all bleed, and I don't think I think we will always feel like we could have done better.
Well, sure.
But, like, I would like to try to mitigate that. There's almost like a disconnect that is, like, necessary.
You gotta kind of dissociate,
and that which I'll have to let that thought cook a little longer. I'm not sure how I feel.
Let her cook.
But detach, that's the word I wanted. Because disassociating, like, for me personally, for anyone else who, like, deals with that actual thing, is, like, completely, like, voiding, like, out. And, like, detaching is, like, I'm still present, I'm still driving. Sure. But, like, I am watching from this scenario. You said something else in there that was really helpful. Oh, man. Did you have any thoughts? You go on.
Well, I saw one more paragraph that just says, when one speaks of bleed, one must also speak of catharsis. Catharsis is the process of empathizing and making an emotional journey along with a character. Catharsis happens many times in our daily lives as we consume different media such as news, movies, and books. Yeah. We all have the ability to connect to and relate to a character deeply enough that it affects us. Yeah. This is not a problem, but when the separation between your character and your personal life fails to happen, it can affect interpersonal relationships, and a role-playing game is, in essence, a community game. We play it with friends, or we make friends through it. It unites people and brings us joy, as we are able to experience things we would not normally experience in our daily lives. Yeah. When it's balanced, we share those tense moments and happy ones. When it's not, it can devolve into toxic behavior. We must also remember that bleed is not one way. It is a lot more frequent to have in-character effect out of character, but sometimes out of character affects in character.
Absolutely.
You could be having a bad week, and that affects how your character is written, how you portray it, and it affects in role playing.
Yeah. I think that made me think of they said something about how also, so depression, anxiety, burnout can absolutely help make that worse. And I think those are the roots of those problems are what I think can create those party and, like, team voices that are not helpful, or are I can't think of the best word, but when those things are driving the ship, or, like, driving the character, there's bound to be maybe more bleed, like it just said, but that is when we can fall into more of those, like, unsafe scenarios. Dealing with, like, lines and veils, because it's the mental health thing that is trying to steer the ship at the moment, rather than the person. So just
recapping, catharsis is a process of immersion with a character or event where you imagine and feel your character experiences while you play them.
Yeah.
This process has a natural beginning where you enter into your character's perspective and experience, an ending where you step back and resolve the feelings from that experience with appropriate closure. You identify with and share the experience as your character, but the boundaries are always there and the separation maintained with the beginning and ending of the experience.
Sure.
Bleed is when immersion affects your psyche too much and boundaries are lost. You take the fictional experiences of your character as those of your player self, and you may confuse others in the same way as being/feeling as their characters do. There is no release, no separation, no closure, as there is with a cathartic response. As a result, you can become trapped in an emotional cycle because the essential separation between your character and the player self is not maintained. This can result in perpetual blurring of identities, feelings, and experiences that potentially risks losing your self-player identity to that of your character. And then burnout is emotional exhaustion caused by either catharsis, immersion, or bleed, or some other aspect of your out-of-character life, job stress, illness, an argument with a friend, etc. And this one gives, like, steps to avoid bleed.
Cool.
One of the primary mechanisms to avoid bleed, the first one we feel we should be addressed, is the simplest one, communication. As a community game, it is important we are open with the ones we play. Speaking of consent in the game is one of the first steps, and specifically to this game that they're talking about. One must remember to set boundaries about what would affect them, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I'm interested. We can, like, look over this some more in depth, but I am interested to know if there's a spot in there that talks about, like, unexpected things like that, because even though Sam does know and, like, TJ does know, like, what's gonna fly, what's not gonna fly, like, I personally still, like, I let the experience get the best of me, and I let myself, like, blur completely. And then I don't think it was a matter of me telling Sam or me telling, like, friends at the table, like, hey, this is not okay for me. It's a matter of, like, I didn't know how to, like, mitigate myself in that moment. Does that make sense? This
also, okay, so the next piece, communicate, blah, blah, blah. Second step, self-awareness. Take a moment to think of your emotions now, who you are, how you feel, where you are. It might seem like a simple, even ridiculous thing to do, but being aware of your present moment can help strengthen boundaries between self and character. This can happen before or after play, or both. Taking a moment to decompress and analyze what has happened in character and out of character. Tactile sensations help. Take a shower, walk barefoot, basically ground yourself. Talking about your character as a character. The character is there, the metaphysical there, and you are here. You are not the character. You don't talk like the character. You might have similarities, but you probably have them with your neighbors, coworkers, and friends. You are still you.
There was this made me think of an interesting story I had heard about. I don't know if it was, like, somebody reading, like, off Reddit posts, like, within, like, r/D&D or whatever, but they were talking about how they were at a tough table for them, and they, like, weren't super familiar with all the people, but they were, like, excited about it. Honestly, I am gonna try to go look up where I found this story, because I want to make sure I clarify if I need to later. But what I remember of the story was one of the characters at the table was technically playing a character who was like Jester. And they, like, sorry for everyone listening, Jester Lavore from Critical Role. But there was a person who was playing a tiefling who was essentially like Jester, but the person who was playing her, or, like, this person inspired by her, was also, like, kind of personally acting like that. Like Jester might, and also, like, more so once they started playing the character, and then started taking, like, this Jester inspired character, like, to the nth degree, like, a little too far. And that's, I'm thinking of this right now, where it's like there is a level of too far, you are not this person, right? And it makes me think of, like, an even larger conversation that we could have about about like parasocial relationships and like the media we consume and like the stock or ownership we feel like we have over certain pieces of media. I remember growing up and like being pissed when other people liked Harry Potter because I was like,
whoa,
that one's mine.
Oh, no.
That is mine. But I think that's, and like I don't feel that way anymore. Let me throw that out there right now. Wait. But I remember as a kid like feeling so frustrated and so like angry, and I think that is a connection to some of this type of topic, which is like I've entwined so much of myself and entangled. I got into an entanglement so much so with that media that I was like, no, this is me. Like this is part of my identity, and if you thwart it, like how dare you? So yeah, that's crazy.
It says dealing with bleed when it has happened already.
Do tell.
When bleed has happened, it may come in many forms: hurt feelings towards your peers, deep sadness because of what has happened to your character that interferes in your life, or even a crush towards people who do not want to have those feelings directed at them.
Say that again?
Even a crush towards people who do not want to have those feelings directed at them. Everyone has some horror stories about what happens when the bleed interferes too much with the player's life, but it isn't the end of the world, but it should be addressed. Remember, bleed is not an unknown phenomenon. Many people some people may experience it more than others, while some may never experience it at all. All of this is perfectly fine and valid as long as you're careful not to let it hurt you and others. When you find yourself experiencing bleed, try these steps. Take a break. Step back from the game and take stock of what happened and your feelings about these events. It might be necessary for you to stop role-playing for a few weeks while you get your emotions in order. This is fine. Communicating out of character, socializing with the players you experience bleed with. Reach out to your community and your roleplay partners. Explain the situation. Talking about it is essential so you can recognize the other person behind the characters and know that they are not their character. Speak about what has happened in character that made you feel bleed. Seek different perspectives, whether from your RP partners or a neutral observer. Usually you will find that while this particular game is full of monsters, the players out of character are not. Debriefing. Go over the whole process. If you still need to take a step back, do so. Take stock of what you have learned, your limitations and your triggers. Avoid them if possible. If not, being aware of what caused the symptoms always help. Lastly, we must address one crucial thing: mental health. Bleed tends to happen a lot less if you are on a healthy mental space, so it can and will be aggravated by depression, anxiety, or any other illness, as well as extreme burnout. We are all susceptible to those. We are human. If you find that you have one of those and it is clashing with your role playing, we do encourage looking out for therapy, out of game, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So,
which we always recommend, period.
So I'm thinking back to that one game and you feeling how you felt. I mean, you took a step back. That's what happened initially anyway. And then, I mean, because we can never schedule more than a month at a time, we took time off anyway.
A break.
And we debriefed. And in that debrief, I don't know, maybe this didn't help you, but in this debrief, I remember being able to say, like, from my perspective as a character that was predominantly affected by this happening, here's how I feel about it, and it is not wholly negative. So I mean, we did it.
You don't have to self-five yourself.
Anyway, great, let's roll with it. We're gonna roll with anyway. Bleed is
She's
a
like,
thing.
I'm done talking about.
That's it.
Talking about bleed. Please let us know, like, either in like the comments or on social media. Actually, in the comments, because this is gonna go on a video platform. But like, let us know your thoughts or like throw in some conversation about it, because I ever so slightly could keep talking about it, but I won't. My thought that I want to leave to transition and to roll with it is fell out of my head as I was making that sentence. What was my question? It was, what happens or what can happen? What do we do about when there are people who are being heavily affected by like things like bleed and like making decisions in that space, in that headspace. What happens when that goes on for too long, and like it's affecting the table, and like how that can change a table dynamic, and how that can turn the table into either bad or potentially good. I'm okay with hearing like thoughts and opinions, but please like drop some comments in the bottom. I know that it'll essentially go back to like communication and like working with your table, but it's just a thought noodle that sounded like fun to think about a little bit more. But for Roll With It today,
we're doing an icebreaker.
I need to like,
it's a 6.
She rolled it, everybody. I need to remember that I want to get a dice cam.
Oh, yeah.
And do our Roll With It eventually. We're doing an icebreaker. Roll With It. What you got?
What skill do you think everyone should have? What skill do you think everyone should have?
I think... No, that's an experience, Soren. De-escalation. Say more. What came to my mind was, I want everyone to have the experience of working in a service industry or adjacent job and deal with having to de-escalate angry, mean, rude people, because it gives you a very wide perspective on the gambit of humans that exist in this world. And also it helps me personally reframe, like, I am going to be so much kinder to like service workers because they have to deal with so much. And so my thought is, if everyone had the scale of being able to de-escalate, even themselves, I think that I wouldn't wish everybody had to work in the service industry to understand what I just explained.
Sure. I think everyone should have the skill of...
that I'm about to say.
Well, I'm just deciding how to word it.
Oh, sure.
Communication's too broad, you know? Because like it's not just being able, but it is. Okay, I think everyone should be able to communicate. I think everyone needs to be able to communicate about how they're feeling, why they're feeling, and how to talk to each other about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which I think like goes very well with this conversation.
Yeah. And like self-awareness a little bit of just like, I can tell I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
And this is where it's coming from. And this is what I want you to take away from the fact that I'm feeling this, which I say that saying that I'm not, perfect at that. Sure. I have issues with being able to,
put it
fully communicate what it is I'm feeling and what I want to happen about it.
Yeah.
But I think if more of us had that ability to say,
that'd be helpful.
I'm feeling scared about this change. It would help them not be like mean.
Yeah.
Meanies.
No, I agree. I 100% agree with that.
There's that.
I honestly think I'm not going to turn this into even more of the pot. And yes, well, anyway, I'm going to say something because you gave me a thought nugget.
Yeah, here she goes.
That's the root of it, is people not understanding how to express what they're thinking, feeling. And the barricade is not necessarily like eloquence, but it's like the barricade is a very lacking tool belt.
Sure.
And I know that in my marriage, TJ has said on multiple occasions to me that I am too, not in a bad way, but like I know myself to an extent and know how to explain like some of my feelings far more than he does. So he's like, so I need you to be a little more like patient with how I do it, because you can express that so much more quickly than I can. It takes me longer to process. So Yeah, I think I think I agree with yours.
Okay, good. Great. That's what I wanted. This one's going to be shorter because I think we've talked about it more than once. It's just like the role-playing side of other players' voices. Can you read what I said?
Yes, I can. My favorite was a few weeks ago. We were like setting up to record this, and we didn't because we were getting to burnout, and we decided to give ourselves a little break. But in that, we had already like written notes, discussed the episode, and then dropped it like a hot potato. And some of our I'm a potato. Some of our stuff we were talking about was like problem solving in role playing and like being able to listen to other players at the table and like what they're saying. And then Caitie said, collaborate with me, damn it.
So
and so I wrote it down.
I just wanted you to say it because I wanted somebody to know that somebody else witnessed me saying that. Here's the thing. Role-playing games, TTRPGs, are inherently collaborative. And we've talked about role-playing before and said things like, nobody wants to force anyone to do something they're uncomfortable doing.
No.
And also, it's not fun to be the only
one who's interested,
the only voice at the table,
the farm,
right? So like if this is me, your friendly neighborhood Caitie, I want to empower you. Listen. I want to empower you to be brave and role play, because chances are there are people at your table who are doing it and they just want you to buy the farm with them.
Yeah. They want you to co-op that Stardew Valley farm.
Right. Like we're all going to quit our jobs and be carrot farmers. We said that already, and now we're doing the things needed to do that. But it takes everyone. Everyone said we were going to quit our jobs and be carrot farmers, and now only 3 people are actually farming the carrots, and we need everyone to farm the carrots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everyone's gotta farm the carrots.
So like the importance of other people's voices in this segment to me, without being redundant about other things we've said in other episodes, is just like, if you feel like other people, they got it, they'll take this scene, I encourage you to challenge that and be in the scene with them. I just because I think it's easy. I've been in moments, even in just like regular old life, where it's like, they'll take care of it. And like, I am missing out on the opportunity to be a part of that, or
be present in a way.
Right. So don't let yourself show up to D&D and take the back seat because it's comfy.
Yeah.
The back seat is comfy. It's spacious. There's a lot of room back there. But every once in a while, we got to take shifts. I'm using a lot of metaphors today.
And I was going to say, this is a lot of metaphors. We got to take shifts driving to our shift at the carrot farm.
Right. Like you can't expect me to drive the whole time. I'll get tired.
Or every single time.
And we'll crash.
Yeah, because I'm going to be asleep at the wheel.
So be brave, take chances, role play, even when you think your voice isn't necessary, because it is 1,000,000% necessary. And it's, as somebody who does a lot of role playing at our table, and I think we talked about this and you agree with me, just like as somebody who does a lot of role playing moments, I get so excited when another player jumps in and does the assist, you know, and like helps make the scene more interesting by adding a voice that isn't mine. You know what I mean? So be brave, take chances, get messy.
That's like gatekeep, girl boss.
Pollinate, germinate,
inseminate.
Anyway. Yeah. Do you have other thoughts about that?
Let me see what I Buy-in isn't. No, you basically echoed everything that I also wrote. So like, I don't know what I meant when I wrote the note role-playing problem solving, but I did write the note to myself as well. Yes, and which is like a note straight out of like improv acting. If you've ever seen someone like do improv, or if you yourself have participated in it, you will find that one of the key features of improv is to take what someone else gave you and run with it.
Right.
So it's called yes and. So the idea is to not say no, which does not mean that you can't say no in a roundabout way. So like you're going to have to do a little bit of mathing. But just because you're saying yes and to like carrying the scene on, I think when it comes to D&D, you're not looking at the character next to you saying the word yes and then carrying on. Caitie.
I'm gonna start a scene and you're gonna show me how to disagree but still yes and, okay?
No.
Soren, I think we should buy a carrot farm.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea if we had the funding.
So she's saying in this scene, she said in a way, no, because we don't have the funding.
No, do not.
But she's saying that does sound like a good idea if we had the funding, which gives me the next line to say, like, here's how we can get the funding. Like I could keep that scene going.
Or you could say something like, ooh, you're right, we don't have the funding. Well, I guess that we're just gonna have to live for the rest of our lives in this stupid New York City apartment and be super sad all the time. Like she could trail off about why she wants to persuade me.
Right. So like she never said, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But she did say, but, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, yes anding is important. And that's how you can, in those moments when you're like, oh, Caitie and Chromatic Rose is said to be brave and leap into this scene. So I want you to hear what they say and say like, how can I yes and that?
Yeah.
And then like think real hard and come up with a sentence and then just let it come out your mouth. And then that person, their job is to yes and back to you. And that's how you make a scene. Yeah. And then a scene is born.
And that doesn't mean that you will never say the word no.
Right.
But in the context of D&D, that is catching the volleyball and then serving it back.
Right.
And like continuing the volley.
I don't remember the full context of the argument with Oren, but Oren said something like, I think we should hear this guy out. The gods aren't the greatest. And Prim didn't say true. And she said, you're wrong. This is what I think. And then that, like, giving the you're wrong, this is what I think.
That is the
gave
yes and.
Grant the ability to then say, like, I hear what you think and I want to hear more of this.
It's kind of like a pass, go, continue.
Right. Where I could have said, he said, I want to hear what this guy says. I could have said, I don't.
Yeah.
And then that would have been end of scene because there's nothing else to do with that. That's it for us this week. Thanks for spending time with us today. We are so grateful. We am so grateful to be able to now try video, and we hope you like it. We're gonna try to do this all the time now. And you'll be able to listen to us in 2 different places. You could like sit and watch us on your TV or listen to us while you do chores on your TV, or you could have us in your ears or for just the Spotify.
You can have us on your phone, like on a video.
You can have us anywhere all the time now.
You can have a laptop with
you can watch us or you cannot.
Yeah.
Your choice. Anyway, thanks to Noah Trumbull for the use of our theme song. There's a link to his Instagram in the episode description. Be sure to give him a follow and stay up to date on his band and his music. We have one script now. Here it is.
I was going to say, I'm going to try to wing this without fully doing it, but we also want to hear from you. So like if something came up in today's conversation, like especially when we were talking about bleed and aftercare and all of that good stuff, we would love to hear from you on the comments. We will we are trying to boost our ability to engage more with our community. And we're just so grateful that you guys are here. So please go ahead. Let us know if you had a thought that came up, you want to continue the conversation. Please do so.
Please.
And also, if you have ideas for other topics or something you just really want to hear us talk about, we would be happy to take some of those suggestions. And you can send some of those either in comments or you can email us. And that would be to, I'm trying this off the top of my head, chromaroses@gmail.com. That's CHROMAROSCS@gmail.com. I know how to spell. And that's all lowercase, but we can't wait to hear from you. And we appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for being here. You're awesome.
Oh, anyway, we're also on Instagram and Facebook. So find us there.
That, you got it. She picked it up.
Yeah, it's cool. Leave us a review also.
Yes, please. That's how people find us.
On Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts.
Pods.
And I guess now on YouTube. Anyway.
Yeah, please. Whoa, here we are. Guess what we get to say now? Please like this video.
Like and subscribe. Hit that bell.
Aw, man. But please like it because it'll tell you know who that you liked watching this and listening to it.
YouTube gods.
Yeah, and then you'll see us more frequently, hopefully. And also subscribe, because I think we eventually would like to put out more than just our podcast episodes here. But if you do subscribe, then you'll be able to see us sooner, and we'll appreciate the support.
We've gone all around this script at this point, which is totally fine.
What do we got left?
Just do that last little bit.
You know what? This has been Chromatic Roses. I'm Soren.
And I'm Caitie. I didn't notate which tagline we're doing. What do you think it is? Be nice or else. Be nice or else.
Okay, bye.